United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization forecasts world population will climb from 6.9 billion last year to 9.2 billion in 2050. Well, given that, the FAO says farming needs a major shift to more sustainable practices. And Caterina Batello is the Senior Agriculture Officer of the FAO, and she joins us now on the phone with more. Caterina, good to have you. Let's just start a little bit with the type of farming trends that are already in place, and these are really the same farming trends that were used back in the 1950s and 1960s.
Hello to everybody. Yes, during what we call the Green Revolution, which took place in the 1950-1960, there was a tremendous growth of production, which was characterized by a high level of homogeneity. So genetically uniformity of seeds of wheat, maize, and rice were grown with high levels of inputs, such as water, pesticides, and fertilizers, to replace the biological processes of nature. And this revolution brought, for example, in Asia, tremendous cereal growth of up to 50% increase, and poverty declined by 30%. But this also had tremendous consequences on the environment, and that's why we need today to shift our major production practices.
So, Caterina, in terms of this, I mean, I'm going to call it a tipping point, but based on the report from the FAO, it looks as if that type of farming has had so many negative side effects that at this point it's actually hurting, right? It's actually driving down supply of several different crops.
This is correct, and today we recognize that. Science recognizes and producers recognize this because they can no longer keep up the production levels they used to have. We know that this green revolution was accompanied by many negative effects, particularly on natural resources, because this was not taken into account. And therefore, those what we call negative externalities are now resulting in tremendous land degradation, soil salinization, tremendous losses of biodiversity, and water and soil pollution that we can no longer ignore.
So I just want to point out a quote because I was sort of surprised by this. This is from the report. It says the number of undernourished people in 2010 was estimated at 925 million, higher than it was 40 years ago, which I think for many people is startling. Part of that, as you mentioned, Caterina, was population growth. But let's talk about just how much you recommend an ecosystem-based farming. How much is that going to save us, and how long will it take to get that in place, and what is it exactly?
We call it sustainable crop production intensification based on an ecosystem approach, because we recognize that we need to increase our total food production by 50–60% in the next 50 years. So we need to keep up the production level, but changing completely the production systems that we have adopted so far. We have to work at a much more intensive level to improve, first of all, the farmers' knowledge and the farmers' practices to know and to understand how to maintain the soil health, the health of their soils, to know how to manage and to adopt integrated pest management systems to reduce the application of chemicals for controlling pests. And we know that we have to make a much more efficient use of our waters and of our nutrients. And we have a number of examples that this is possible. We already have technologies, and if you want, I can give you some examples, that this is feasible with a lot of efforts and knowledge by farmers and the right policies and incentives by the governments.
Caterina, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but we would love to have you back and focus a little bit more on those specific examples you mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Caterina Batello of the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization joining us on the phone live from Rome.